In this session, we're going to explore a NASA startup case study that will present key information to help other companies and investors effectively pursue the productization of government technology. Our speakers are Janeya Griffin, who's licensing manager and technology transfer specialist at NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center in Edwards, California. She's given numerous presentations on transferring technology from federal laboratories. An executive board member for the Federal Laboratory Consortium, FLC. For tech transfer, she holds a certification in entrepreneurial technology commercialization from Cal State University, San Bernardino, and 2 bachelor of science degrees, criminal justice and chemistry. She's a big-time techie. The second speaker is Kraettli Epperson, the CEO and co-founder of Vigilant Aerospace Systems, a company that provides autonomous collision avoidance software for unmanned aircraft based on a patent exclusively licensed from NASA. He has a 20-year career as a serial entrepreneur and investor in federal startups. He also is the co-founder of R7 Solutions, which provides mapping and workflow systems for utilities, pipelines, wireless, sonar, wind, and rail systems, including software to manage the land data system for Houston's Metro billion-dollar regional rail system. Welcome, Janeya and Kraettli.
Okay, so you guys ready? Yes. So this is going to be an interactive session because I don't like to be bored and I don't want you guys falling asleep. So if you are and I pick on you, just be ready to answer a question. But like you said, my name is Janeya Griffin. I'm at NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center. And so today we're going to be kind of tag teaming this. We're going to be talking about what are the startup successes and how are you able to basically license a federal laboratory technology as a startup. What does that look like? So Kraettli is going to give a little bit of talk about what is Flight Horizon, which is a product that they actually commercialized using a NASA technology. And we'll also talk about vetting federal technologies for their commercialization potential. There are a lot of different innovations that come out of the federal labs, and so finding out which of those innovations are actually relevant is really important for us and how we actually go about licensing those technologies. We're going to talk about validating some of the market potential. Where do we see the best fit? How did Kraettli actually look at that market to determine whether or not this was going to be a good fit for his company? And then also negotiating a win-win deal. The federal laboratories in general, NASA just being one of them, is really focused on fairness and actually seeing licensees succeed because it's great for our economy, right? And so we'll talk about that. We'll go into a little bit more detail. We'll talk about building a market-ready product. And I think Kraettli will go a little bit more in detail on that. And then what does cultivating the market actually look like? And then we'll give you a little bit of conclusion, some lessons learned, and then answer your questions. So I'll ask that all questions be held until the end. And then I think we have about 10 minutes to answer questions.
All right. Hi, I'm Kraettli Epperson, and I'm going to be talking about Vigilant Aerospace Systems, which is the startup company that has licensed this technology. We've worked very closely with Janeya and Laura, who are both in the tech transfer office at NASA Armstrong. And we're very fortunate we have senior NASA engineer Ricardo Ortega with us today, who is the inventor of the technology. So I may point it in occasion. So I'm going to tell you real quickly before we kind of go into what we're really going to talk about: the licensing process, the startup process, the transition process from patent and prototype into a commercial and marketable product. But I want to give you just a little bit of background on what the technology is. And I'm going to go pretty quickly through most of my slides because I do want to leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So this is the tech that I'm going for both piloted and autonomous vehicles. And it actually monitors the airspace and provides specific commands to do the self-separation and avoidance of an aircraft, whether it is piloted, a manned aircraft, or unmanned. And so it is a system for doing fully autonomous self-separation and situational awareness in the airspace. It's based on this exclusively licensed patent, which was fully published in the summer last year. We have fully implemented software. We have transponder integration, so there's some amount of hardware, including avionic transponders, radars, other things that we're adding to the system to feed into that detect and avoid process. So it's either a laptop or tablet-based, and you can see a picture over here of it. Really, it helps meet FAA requirements and other civil aviation authority requirements for unmanned aircraft to be able to detect and avoid or see and avoid the aircraft around them. So it fills a really important technical gap in the market right now that everybody is scrambling to try and figure out the sensors and then the intelligence on the system to really deliver the safety. So it has years of flight testing. We'll talk a little bit about that. And Ricardo was the initial inventor and flight tester of this. And it's really designed to meet a growing demand for what we call industrial flying, which is focused on long-range flying for inspecting things like bridges, pipelines, solar farms, highways, all of the infrastructure that needs to be looked at regularly, that doesn't always get looked at. Really important growing need for public safety. I'm going to show you a real quick video just so you can see in the interface how the software works, and a picture tells the story here soon. So here, you'll see here, that white aircraft represents your own aircraft, and it's going through a maneuver here. Those yellow and red circles are warning circles around the aircraft, and the aircraft the software has detected that there's a potential conflict and collision, and so it has directed the aircraft to descend, and then now it's going past that potential conflict, and it is ascending back onto its original flight plan, and you can see that green line is that flight guidance that the software is monitoring and managing. This is a real quick example of the way that the software works. And so it's doing a lot of thinking in the background, can monitor the entire airspace, and on a sub-second basis make decisions about what to be done to keep the ownership safe.
Okay, so vetting federal technologies for commercial potential. So let's just talk real quick about a lot of the technologies that come out of the federal labs. So there are actually 300 plus federal laboratories. So like I said, NASA is just one of those. And so what exactly are we looking at when these innovations are coming down the pipeline to us? So we have our inventors, our innovators, Ricardo being one, disclose these technologies to us. And so we have to actually look at whether or not there is any commercial potential from an investment standpoint in terms of patenting, in terms of do we put more resources into continuously to further develop the technology, in terms of manpower, in terms of reaching out to other companies and kind of looking at what the market looks like, do an assessment for that. And so all of this, it costs money, of course. And so we need to figure out, is this something that we actually want to go forward with? So why NASA patents IP? Who in here pays taxes? Thank you. Okay, so NASA thanks you, federal laboratories thank you for paying your taxes, but what we want to do is bring a return on investment to our taxpayers. And so how do we do that? We patent ideas that come out of mission-specific goals. We have innovations that come out of that. And so, like I said, we look at that to see if there is any commercialization potential. NASA's mission, as opposed to all other federal laboratories, they each have their own mission in terms of what their goal is to actually get these technologies out to the commercial sector. But NASA's mission is to actually to disseminate all the technologies we have to the widest extent possible. And so we do that by basically offering all of the technologies that we have up for these different categories. So there are a bunch of different applications that actually come out of the technologies that we have. So I'll go back to the mission-specific goals. So each project, each program has their own specific mission. And so technologies come out of that when problems are solved. And so the inventors actually disclose those technologies to us. We look at the commercial potential and what are the functionalities of that technology, right? So when you look at the functionality of that technology, that functionality can actually be applied to many different industries. So you might have a technology, for instance, that is in the health and biotech industry, but it was not invented for that initially. And so these are all the different categories that we actually have on our website, which I'll give you guys in a minute, that you can look at all of the functionality of the technologies and then kind of see where that may fit for you. And so there's three things that we actually look at. So we look at the market research. Does the technology actually meet a market need? Is there a problem that it's solving outside of what it was originally invented for. And so if that is yes, then we move forward. And then we also do a prior art search. We try to look at it as almost like a competitive matrix standpoint. So what are the other technologies or methodologies or even potential competitors that exist currently in the market? And is there a competitive advantage that this technology would have over what's currently existing? And so if that's a yes, then we also move forward. And then the level of development. So we like to use what's called a TRL or technology readiness level. And so that really allows us to dictate where the technology is development-wise. And so I think in Scott's presentation, we were talking about bridging the gap and what that looks like with development and getting it from a commercialization standpoint, from a development standpoint to a commercialization standpoint. When is it actually ready to be commercialized? So a lot of the technologies that we have within the federal laboratories have a very low TRL. And so we need to actually partner with companies and startups to actually further develop that technology so that it actually is ready to be commercialized from that standpoint. So sometimes they're not ready to go, and you need a company that is willing to invest in order to take that next step further. And so we do a lot of marketing. NASA doesn't like marketing, but so what we do is called active outreach. We do a lot of passive outreach as well. And so that's when you'll see like our website, we'll post the technologies that are available for licensing on our website. And if you happen to come to our website, then you can browse that and look through that and contact us. But the active outreach that we do is actually going out to conferences and talking to people, cold calling people that we think have a fit or have a need for the technology. And so that happens as well. We have, like I said, a lot of online postings. And if you go to technology.nasa.gov, it gives you an entire outlook on the actual technology transfer program across the entire agency. So not just at NASA Armstrong. So there's 10 different NASA centers, Armstrong just being one of them. And we focus on flight research. So here you'll see one of our inventors is actually at a conference talking to potential licensees about the technology, about the benefits of it, how it could potentially solve some of their problems, or maybe even asking them what are the problems that they're facing. Because what we're seeing a lot now is that, when we develop products, like I said before, they're not ready to actually go out and be commercialized right away. So if we could try to include that development process and what those needs are into the development of that product or of that technology, then it furthers it along a little bit more. We also have NASA licensing webinars, and so we'll have the inventor provide a webinar where they will give all the information about the technology, we'll invite a bunch of people out, and then they will be able to ask questions on the webinar and then download the slide presentations. And so also, if you go onto this website, we have our patent portfolio, the entire patent portfolio across the entire agency in one place. And so all you do is you go online, you can type in a keyword, maybe you like UAVs, you like aerospace, all of those technologies that are associated with that keyword will pop up, all of the patents will pop up, and it'll give you information about that technology, who you can contact, what are potential applications, what are some of the benefits, and then there's also a link that you can click on that will take you straight to a licensing application.
All right, so from a startup company or really an investor's point of view, how do you find these technologies, and how does our particular story go based on what Janeya is talking about with all the ways that NASA does outreach? So this is my not very great cell phone photo of the first time that I saw Ricardo speaking and presenting his technology, and this was a very exciting moment. I did take a photo of it. We had heard about this technology because one of our investment partners was asking around NASA and at the Federal Laboratory Consortium organization, what's an interesting technology? What's the hottest technology right now in the FLC system? And someone told us, you should go see this presentation. And so I went and saw this presentation, and that's when we first started having this discussion with NASA Armstrong. Conferences and publications are fantastic. These websites are great, and I look at them regularly. And NASA has lots of innovative programs to get stuff out of the lab and have a straight work. There are some technologies, I'm sure Janeya will talk about this today. They have a really fast licensing process just for specific technologies. So the first thing that we had to do was validating the market. So we did that by an initial screening to meet and talk with the inventor. We signed an NDA with NASA so they could provide us with all the technical background on this very freely, and we could look at all that. That led us to do a lot of research. We looked at market applicability. Where does this fit in the market? Where is it needed? And there was an obvious need in the future. And I'll talk about what our problem solution statement looked like as we were doing our analysis, and that's really guided our entire company. Competitiveness, how does it compare? So we had to do some initial basic research about how does this compare to the other ways to solve this problem. And then, is it disruptive? So that's a word that gets used a lot in early stage technology investing. And the idea is it going to create a new category of product? Is it 10 times better than something that exists in that category now? Is it truly disruptive? Because it's very difficult to raise private capital and venture capital for businesses if they don't have that potential to be highly disruptive. And then ultimately what we came up with, which I'll talk about in a minute, is our problem solution statement. So when we went out and looked at this is based on an FAA forecast. This has to do with the millions of new drones, and particularly commercial drones, not just the toy drones, but the mid-sized and larger drones that are rapidly entering the market. That's happening in the U.S. It's happening outside the U.S. There's a lot of experimentation going on right now, a lot of really rapid development. So that was one of the first things we looked at, and half a dozen different forecasts from different people. The other thing that we thought about and looked at was the nature and size of the problem. So this is a problem that we were able to quickly identify of unmanned aircraft encountering manned aircraft reporting encounters with unmanned aircraft. The number that we look at is the fact that in the 2015 to the 2016 reporting period, that went up by 46% in the United States. And it's an average of about 5.3 incidents per day. They get all the way to the point that they're published by the FAA as an incident. There's probably multiples of that where it doesn't actually get all the way to publication. So we knew there was a big and growing problem here. So our problem solution statement was millions of drones, no good connection to air traffic control, which is a big open problem that we're helping to fill. No ability to detect and avoid when you've got an aircraft that is at the extent of your line of sight, extended visual line of sight, beyond line of sight. These are kind of technical categories of how you fly. And so we looked at that, and there really wasn't a good solution. The solution exists, it's viable, they had good IP protection, which was obviously an important analysis that we undertook. Uses existing infrastructure, so it doesn't have to remake the way we do air traffic control in the U.S. Meets a likely regulatory hurdle, so we had to learn about the regulations. That's a really big issue. It was really a first-to-market opportunity, and then we created a go-to-market strategy.
Okay, so I mentioned we're going to talk about negotiating a win-win deal, and what does that actually look like. So, are there any startups in here? Well, maybe you guys know of startups, or if you do, then you can tell them this information as well. What we see a lot, and I've gone to a lot of different conferences and spoke with a lot of people from the startup era, is that they're really stuck on like, why would NASA want to work with me? I'm just a startup. This is not something that, that they would really be interested in, but that's actually not true. So we know that the startup culture is something that is really taking our economy to the next level, right? And so we want to continue to help that grow. And so what does that look like for us, right? And so what we came up with is actually our startup option for licensing. And so and Kraettli didn't get a chance to take advantage of this, but they wanted some different terms. But the startup license basically is a free license for the first 3 years of developing a technology or bringing it to practical application. So we're telling the startups to basically hold their money and use it towards something else rather than coming to pay licensing fees. So go out, develop this technology, further the development of it, and then when you find a customer or when you bring it to practical application, then come back to us, and then that's when you will start paying royalties. And it's a pre-negotiated license agreement. The terms, 4.2% royalty rate, $3,000 as an annual minimum. And so this allows us to really help those startups who may be, looking for the next best thing or the next innovation, or to have a competitive advantage against what's out there on the market. So how do you stay relevant as you continue to innovate? But if you're kind of stuck, what do? And so, you have access to the NASA portfolio and all of those patents. And so then you can kind of pick and choose which one you want that may be able to help your product, or you may be able to actually create a business out of that product. And so we really look at, like I said before, the federal government isn't in it to make money. We want to create a return on investment for the taxpayers, but we're not trying to tax the taxpayers, right? And so we look at what is a win-win deal, because when our licensees actually succeed, that is a success for us. And so what can we do to kind of help them go along, help them further go along in order to win? So there are a bunch of different evaluation licenses, a bunch of different licenses that we have. So the startup is just one option. We have an evaluation license, which allows the company to actually evaluate the technology, evaluate the feasibility, if it's something that's actually going to be suitable for their company, if it's going to work with the product or with the idea they're wanting to go with, or if the market even says anything about, hey, this is something that we want to see, or it is something that's actually solving the problem that's needed. And so we give them about maybe 6 months to a year. It really just depends on, what that plan looks like, but it's $2,500. And we allow you to internally do research and evaluate the technology and make a decision on actually licensing it from a commercial standpoint to create a product. And then you have your commercial licenses. So you have a non-exclusive license, you have exclusive, partially exclusive, and then co-exclusive. So Kraettli took advantage of the exclusive option, and that was something that we negotiated. But we also wanted to understand what was fair to them and what was something that would allow them to win in, what they wanted to do. So a lot of times investors don't like the word non-exclusivity. So if that's something in their strategy in terms of fundraising, how they're going to get the capital to get to where they need to go, then we kind of look at that. We're aware of how businesses or what businesses need to do in order to survive and in order to be successful. So we take all of that into account. So if you're a startup, but you're also looking for exclusivity, then we are able to be flexible with what those options look like. Like I said, we want it to be a win-win deal. And then we also have Space Act agreements, which provide you access to our inventors and then sometimes the facilities and capabilities that we have. With the federal government, I think they normally use what are called CRADAs, Cooperative Research and Development Agreements, but NASA is unique. And so we have the authority to use a Space Act agreement, which came about during kind of like the Cold War. We were doing the space race against Russia. So they wanted NASA to be able to partner with industry in order to get us there a lot faster. And so those agreements are able to be negotiated as well. So if you are looking for maybe some time from the inventor in order to help you develop your product, you would like them to consult for you, if you would like to use some of the facilities, then we would negotiate with that mechanism, which is basically a mechanism that allows for reimbursability.
All right, and so continuing on with the story of Vigilant Aerospace and how you fit into this framework, we did go through the full licensing process and negotiated terms, and we also do have a Space Act agreement, which has been very helpful. So in our process, we applied for the license, so there was a formal application process. As a part of that, we were competing to describe to NASA what we were going to do and how we were going to be the best option for this technology. So we put together a business plan, we put together full pro formas, and we put together a forecast and a balance sheet, profit and loss, in order to have the full business plan in place as a part of our application and bid for this technology. So the bidding process, we went through and put all those materials together, had an ongoing discussion with NASA, and then we placed our formal bid for this technology. It goes through a Federal Register publication process when you're doing the type of license that we're doing. So, biting our nails a little bit through that process. We've done all of our research and homework, and so we were optimistic that it was going to work out. But that's the process we went through. Critical factors in us winning the license and really us being able to build this startup were getting familiar with the market and the technologies. It really takes a lot of homework. We had a vision for the product, so we didn't just say, we take this, we're going to put it on the market. We really had a larger vision for how it fit into an overall aviation and unmanned aircraft ecosystem that's rapidly developing in the U.S. We had an idea for product market fit, where it was going to fit into that market, and then a vision for the future, so how we would take that second or third version of this product
as the market developed and bring that out. And we feel that those things were very important. So we negotiated with NASA. The things that I would say about that negotiation, obviously we negotiated about things like license fees, percentage rates, milestones, things that NASA needs us to complete at certain points in order for the license to continue to be viable from their point of view. And in that process, we learned a lot. All those things were important parts of our negotiation. We relied upon books. We relied upon the guidelines. There's obviously a whole industry of information out there. Some of you are probably involved in that industry. We had an attorney with great experience. We had other advisors who had great experience. And all of that allowed us as a startup to quickly get the expertise we needed to go ahead and put our business plan together and be successful in licensing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our development process, so commercialization process. So once we won the license, yay, we were very, very happy about that. Really excited. We started our IP transfer process pretty quickly, so we collected all of the information about patent prosecution, all the source code for the prototype software that Ricardo and his team had been developing and then test flying for years, all the documentations, the notes, there were lab notes. NASA is great about having lots of materials around their inventions, so that was great. We took that in and we put it into our own commercial agile software development process. We put it on a timeline and we started working. Extensive evaluation of the existing software. So we were really lucky. One of the reasons that we licensed this was there was existing software and existing flight testing on that software. And so it put it head and shoulders above a lot of other technologies we might have considered. So we immediately started looking at what it was going to take this from where it was being used at NASA out to the larger commercial market. So we worked on the interface and we moved with a piece of software. Functional changes, the market was changing rapidly. We wanted to be able to deal with smaller aircraft, for example, so we made changes. New hardware is coming out almost all the time. Aviation is a little slow with new hardware, but there were new things on the market that we wanted to be able to talk to so that we could hit a much larger swath of the market. So we immediately started working on that. A lot of review and quality control, just a continuous cycle. And then we started taking it up to customers, and we started getting customer feedback, which was the most exciting part of this. And that allowed us to create a product roadmap of specific things that customers wanted around this sort of kernel of value is how is this going to fit into their operation. And so we started working on that and doing testing, lots of different types of flight testing. So I'll just mention Ricardo and his team began testing this in 2013. We went out and created, as soon as we had what we call our small UAS, so the very large, very expensive Icona, which is a Predator B, a civilian model that we don't have ourselves and don't really have access to. And most of our customers are not necessarily flying a large aircraft like that. So we decided we're going to prove to the market, and this was really quite a deliberate decision on my part, that we can also fly the same technology that NASA has been using on these large and expensive operations on very small aircraft. And we immediately went out and did that. And we had a lot of support and cooperation from NASA in doing that. And so we went back in 2016 and 2017, had been doing additional flight testing, basically through our Space Act agreement. And NASA's been very generous with their airspace, which they can control to allow us to do things like beyond visual line of sight testing. And to get the FAA and the SEC involved, that's been great. And Ricardo Ortega and his team has an AIA paper coming out that we've been able to make some contributions to in December and January. So we have ongoing flight testing now. This is what we do. We're adding new features, filters. We're working on what it looks like when you get slower moving aircraft talking to each other and doing lots of customer demonstrations and now customer flights.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the outreach contributions that we've shared with the commercial industry and also internally. So like I said, and this is like my motto all the time is, we want to bring a return on investment to taxpayer funding. So what we do is how we show you that we're bringing an investment or we're bringing you a return is by writing success stories. And so what are the successes that our licensees are doing in the commercial sector with technology that was not originally invented for that? How is it impacting the economy? What type of products are they putting out? What problems are they solving? And how is the money that the taxpayers are providing really able to help that along? So we also put in for awards. One of the, I guess at the federal labs, a lot of the outside companies are not able to submit themselves for awards. So what we do, because we are a member of that community, we are able to include them into that submission. And so we have won several awards that focused on commercialization of technologies, being innovative, licensing, and actually working with the commercial industry. And so we actually do that for all of our licensees because we want them to be successful. So when they are successful, we are successful. And of course, NASA has a broader reach in terms of who's actually looking at them. And so if we can put out to our audience that, hey, these are the technologies that are in the commercial space that you now have access to, then that actually works out for both of us.
So we just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go through a few slides real quickly here. So we have pursued, as a startup, we don't have a huge amount of money for marketing. So we have focused on public relations and been very successful with that. People are very interested in what we're doing. NASA co-publishes some of our press releases, which has been very helpful. And so we've gotten a huge amount of press, and that's resulted in a lot of people in the industry quickly finding us and approaching us, which has been fantastic. We also speak at a lot of conferences. That's really been great to talk to the people who are really focused on our area. We do a lot of industry outreach. So this is something that even the smallest startup can do at very low cost and have a big impact. We manage a newsletter. We only talk about ourselves, and we have a lot of subscribers. So people are very interested in the topics that we're talking about. We have a blog. We have a strong social media presence, buy mugs. And, we want to be on your desk. And the other thing is that we actually created an initiative to maintain a beyond line of sight capable drone list for the industry. And all we ask for is that you subscribe to our newsletter and you get that for free. And so about quarterly, we'll update that. And it's the only list of all the beyond line of sight capable drones on the market available now in the U.S. And that's had a great industry response. And it's tangential, but very, very important for what we do. We've gotten very well received by the senior analysts in the industry. I'll just skim through these because I know we've got limited time here. And I'll let Janeya take over.
Okay, so in summary, NASA is a good source of innovations to be commercialized. So other government agencies as well. So like I said, I'm part of the Federal Laboratory Consortium, over 300 labs. We all do tech transfer. And so that is, I guess, a secret that's not really a secret unless you know where to go. You know where to go. And so having that out on the websites, basically bringing awareness to, hey, you guys have access to these technologies, you have access to our innovators, you have access to our facilities and the capabilities that we provide because we want to help you be successful, I think is a message that not a lot of people hear, but this is why you're here, so you can learn the secret. And so there are a lot of collaborative R&D benefits for both parties. Like Kraettli said, we actually helped them with some of their R&D that they were doing in terms of the testing. So they actually came out to the center. We have this dry lake bed that has no lake. Of course, it's dry. And so we flew over all of that, and that was a great opportunity, not only for us, but also for them, because they were able to get the data that they now share and actually integrate into more product development and better testing and better information for customers.
All right. I just have a few final lessons learned from our startup's point of view that I'm going to share, and we'll have time for some Q&A. First thing was we did a lot of homework. Do your homework. That was important when we were bidding on this to be the exclusive licensee. We needed to know what we were talking about. Find great technologies to start with. We were able to look at things that we really felt were really at the top of the list in the federal laboratory ecosystem and something that was really ready for commercialization. We researched it in depth. We were looking for, at the same time, you have to match that to a rapidly growing market. And that's something that we were really able to do with that. That was really a key. We hired experienced advisors. That should go without saying, but it really is important when you're doing something like this. You have to be patient, obviously. Accessing federal technology does take time. We have to follow the rules and go through the process to make that happen. And the thing that we're constantly reminded of and that we take out to the market, we take to our investors, we take to employees, everyone that we talk to, it's so important, that relationship with NASA. And we really are standing on the really huge shoulders and a lot of research and effort that's gone in that we're then able to just be sort of the tip of that spear and take it out into the market. And that's incredibly helpful. But obviously, it does take that time and patience to make that happen. And we've also been very happy to take advantage of cooperative agreements and opportunities that NASA has continued to make available to us. And we're creative with our time and money with NASA so we get the best impact. We can do sorts of tests there that we can't do anywhere else with people and sensors and things that we just don't have anywhere else. And that's been really fantastic for us.
And that's commercializing Federal.
Yes.
Are there any questions?
Kraettli, you mentioned about a bidding process. Can you explain about a bidding process? I didn't understand what does that mean. Is it more than one licensee at the time?
I'll let Janeya answer part of that as well. In order to get the exclusive license to this technology, you have to go through a process of presenting a very specific case to NASA and their technology transfer office. They have to do a lot of review of that, obviously. And then they also ultimately have to, they may be talking to other people that are bidding for the same technology, and there was some of that in this case. And then ultimately they have to publish it through the Federal Register, for example, so that there's a public notice that you're going to license this. And that's all, that there are rules set out for that in regulations. And so we get to learn those rules, our attorney knew those rules in depth. And so that's the process we went through.
Just a follow-up. What is the criteria for bidding? Is it like I'm going to give more money, or I have a better plan to take this to market?
Hopefully some of all of the above. Maybe Janeya can speak.
Yeah, so of course with the government, we have to be fair. We have to compete everything that we do. And so because this is taxpayer funding and we're making money from it, essentially, right? Because we get the royalties and then we take those royalties and then we put that back into more R&D. So the mission that I talked about earlier, disseminating to the widest extent possible, right? So we have to provide some form of justification and rationales to why we're only going to give it to one company rather than just give it to everybody or supply some sort of non-exclusive over an exclusive license. And so because of the exclusiveness, we have to look at what are the other commercial companies that are out there? Have they actually inquired about it? Is it something that they would be interested in? And so in order to do that, because they haven't had the opportunity to see this, we put it out on the Federal Register for a certain amount of time. It's normally 15 to 30 days. And we give other companies the opportunity to say, hey, I didn't know that this existed. I want some part of that exclusivity. And so if that does happen, then we would have to actually step back, look at both of the commercialization plans and say, okay, who is going to be the most successful at bringing this to market? And then looking at the overall company and what that looks like. So there's kind of like a comparability, right? And so if there is actually an opportunity to carve out a space for each of them, then we will look into doing that because we want to disseminate it to the widest extent possible. Now, from Kraettli's perspective, it is considered a bidding process. And so that's probably where the confusion came in because it's not really bidding.
It's not really bidding, but it feels like a bidding process, right?
And so those are the policies that we have and the guidelines that we follow in order to do it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yeah.
In the example you just gave with two of them competing against it, I hadn't heard of a co-exclusive license.
Yes, so there is an option for co-exclusivity. That's something that both of the companies would actually have to agree on. Normally, you would get that if the market is actually big enough for multiple players and maybe they have separate applications and it's not a direct, it might be indirect competition. And so we kind of look at that to say, okay, well, is this going to be something that is detrimental? Because like I said, we want the company to be successful. And so if now we're licensing to two companies and they're going to be fighting at each other's throats for a piece of the market, who's actually going to win? Like if one of them is going to go down, it doesn't make sense to do that. So we might just do a non-exclusive and say you guys can both take it. And then that would be at the risk of the company. But we definitely talk to them about that beforehand. But they would both have to agree in order to do that.
Well, and you might have, industry exclusive, right? So if you had one application that's exclusively for military and one application that's exclusively for oil and gas exploration or something like that, you could do licenses.
Yeah. So that's where we get into partial exclusivity, and that is for a specific field of use. So even though it might be within the same industry, like I said, it might be for separate applications.
You talk about open source, and what's the decision point where you might say, well, this IP, we're just going to open it up to everyone versus a specific process like this where you go through vetting of...
Right. So one thing that I didn't cover was our software catalog. So a lot of the software that is generated, we kind of just give away unless it really has to have some form of justification for us to actually put some investment into patenting into it. Now, when you come up with, I guess, some ideas that may essentially, you want to be pushed out into the market, then, we kind of look at that and kind of just decide. But we have to look at all of the criteria that would enable us to actually make that decision.
I have a question about the IP philosophy. You said that you evaluate the solutions that you developed and make a decision on whether you're going to patent. How does that put you in a position for NASA? Because if, at the end of the day, you don't patent, and someone else then patents,
right,
you've actually eliminated the government use in the future. So how do you rationalize that?
So it depends on, we have to look at, okay, if we were to release this and the bad guys got it or somebody got it that, let's just say this was saving lives, right? And so we decided that we're just going to release it to everybody, but then a company comes in and they tweak it and then they patent it and then they charge an enormous amount of money so that the people whose lives it needs to save, they can't even have access to it because it's so expensive, right? And so we actually look at all of that and weigh those options to say, okay, is this something that we're really wanting to do? We also look at if this is something that, maybe turned into a standard, right? And so what is in the benefit of the nation in order for us to, should we patent it to protect it? Because that is an option, right? So sometimes we want to protect things so a company doesn't come in and then upcharge it and then sell it to us with something that we actually created. And that has happened on several occasions. And so you have to be very knowledgeable in looking at that criteria to determine and actually looking at, if that's a big enough risk, if you're just going to release it or whether or not we're going to actually license it to a company. So that is something that we do look at, and it goes into helping us decide our strategy. You have a question in the back?
My question is with respect to your marketing strategies with people at conferences and posting online and other things. Can you give an idea of which is more successful?
So I would have to say that I think they complement each other, right? So you have to have a little bit of both passive and active marketing in order to really try to reach a broad audience, because you don't want to say, okay, well, I'm just going to focus on active marketing, and then you're losing all of the people that may be just coming to your website to see some of the technologies passive, right? And so I think the active marketing, we really use that when we're focusing on the high profile technologies within our portfolio, the ones that maybe we've just patented and we're saying like, hey, we really want to get this out. We see the commercial viability in this. Maybe we've worked on it a little bit more to increase what that TRL level is. And so now we feel that it might be the best case scenario in terms of low-hanging fruit for a company to come in and actually take it to commercialization. And so I think it's a little bit of both. If going to the conferences is really more targeted, because we can actually look at the attendees that are there and say, oh, we know that this company is doing this. We can do a little bit of research beforehand. And then you know where they're going to be instead of cold calling them and saying, hey, is this something that you think you would be interested in? Rather than you're in their face and you're asking them like, hey, this is, we know this is a problem that you might be having. This is a technology that can solve it. Giving them a demo like right on hand, because we have like maybe small prototypes or whatever that we might bring with us. And so they're able to see it. And we get a lot of interest that way to say, oh my gosh, yes. So you've already established that relationship. And so now when you go home, you do call and get on the phone and then you have an additional conversation about the next steps in order to license, because you've already found out that they're interested in the technology.
I have a second question.
Okay.
Last question.
Last one. Okay. This has to do with protecting the product itself. So you work with a startup company, and this is a technology that probably has potential of being cracked by somebody. Who worries about this? NASA, the startup company, or both?
So There are a bunch of different, avenues that you could take in terms of patentability and protection. So if we realize ahead of time that this has the potential to go into markets outside of the U.S., we can actually look at doing an international patent because we know for sure, we've done the market research, we know that there is a need, and we know that there are companies that if they got their hands on it internationally would just sell this, right? And so that might, even though they might not be able to sell in the U.S. if we had a U.S. patent, that would still be competing with our licensees. So like I said, we want them to be successful. So we do look at that strategy ahead of time. Now, if a company does, let's just say, take a technology and now they are infringing on our patent, it is up to the company to actually go and sue them. But NASA would definitely be there to support in what those claims that they're making are. So we also look at okay, is this something that they are, utilizing and infringing on? And if so, then because the company has licensed it, they actually can go and sue the company. So with the government, it's kind of difficult for us to sue another company unless it really has a big detrimental impact to the entire government. If it's a small company or, if it's not something that is really detrimental to the economy or anything like that, then we leave it up to the companies to do that, or the licensees, I guess.
Let's thank Janeya and